So we are talking episode 4 of Perry Mason, where we see Mason and Pete putting the puzzles to the pieces together. We get some really good moments with our supporting cast members. And EB, things aren't looking too good for him. We're going to talk about that and much more. Mason and Strickland lean on Virgil again for extra legal assistance. Following Sister Alice's recovery from a terrifying episode, Birdy urges her daughter to renounce her claims about baby Charlie. EB faces the reality of his financial situation and takes his frustrations out on Della. Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with my weekly recap, breakdown, and review of the latest episode of HBO's Perry Mason. We're talking about episode 4. Very excited to talk about this episode. The season and the show is I'm starting to like a lot of the stuff now. All the pieces are starting to come together. Very excited to talk about it in this spoiler review, discussion, and full breakdown. So if you haven't seen the latest episode, go check it out. Enjoy yourself. Come back and let me know what you all thought of the episode. But if you've seen it, you are in the right place. Before we dive into the spoiler discussion, as you can see on the screen now, make sure you follow me on all my social media accounts. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my new content. Give this video a thumbs up. Helps out the channel, but I also really appreciate it. And last but not least, when you've seen this episode, let me know what you're thinking about EB. Is it all done for EB? Will Della come and save him? What are you thinking about the detectives and, them calling Mason a bum and him really kind of figuring out the pieces? Let me know what you all thought about episode 4 of Perry Mason. So as I always do with these reviews, I kind of do the recap, breakdown. So we're going to start it off here in a bit, but I got to say, this is my favorite episode so far. For whatever reason, the tone of the show, the jokes of the show, the characteristics, the personality of the show is really starting to build for me. It took me a little bit, as you all noticed, been watching my previous 3 episodes, reviews. It's been a bit of a slow burn, but now things are starting to come together, and I'm really starting to like this show a little bit more than I did when I first started. So let's start off by saying, one of the things that I noticed right off the bat was we get some character moments. We get some quieter moments with our characters. We really haven't spent that much time with Mason per se and his backstory. We get that in this episode. Della is really a good actress to me, the actress that plays her, and I liked her character, but she's just been kind of babysitting Emily for the first 3 episodes, but we get more from her. EB, so I'm really liking where this show is headed because we're now getting those character moments that we weren't getting, at least for me, in the first 3 episodes. So first and foremost, we kind of kick off the episode where we're seeing Sister Alice is at home. She's recovering from her, episode of having a seizure. We see that she gets some visitors, this family. Seems like a nice, welcoming family from her church, and they give her a box of goods, and those box of goods turns out to be a box of snakes. I'm surprised she didn't get bit by a snake, but that didn't happen. But nevertheless, that kind of sets the tone where you're seeing the people from Sister Alice's church. Some of them still love her and want to see the resurrection of Charlie, and some of them are not liking what she's saying, not liking the direction she's taking the church, and we see that from the elders, and we'll talk about that here in a bit. But it's starting to show you that the church is kind of turning on Sister Alice, especially after what she announced of resurrecting Charlie come Easter Sunday. So we're going to talk about that here in a bit, but definitely an interesting way to start off the show. Again, I had mentioned that Della hasn't gotten that much to do in this season, at least for me, besides being, a good secretary to EB and being kind of the babysitter for Emily Dodson and really looking out for her. But again, we're going to talk about her a little bit later, but I love that we get some more backstory from her character. But as we kind of move on, we see EB is able to get Emily in protective custody, but the bail stays exactly the same. But we also find out that Barnes is now going to get Matt to testify against Emily, which will be very interesting to see. We saw that his dad is down his ear. He finds out everything about Emily and George, so it'll be really interesting to see when that scene plays out, if he's going to go through with testifying against his own wife, or will things kind of occur where he's going to maybe come to his senses and realize that he's not doing the right thing. So that'll be a really interesting thing to keep looking forward to in the next episodes. I'll be honest, like I said, the first 10 minutes or so, man, it was the vibe, the tone, the music, the jokes were landing for me, especially that first scene where we see Mason and his partner Pete bring Virgil over to the house, talking, just having guy talk or whatever the case may be. They're trying to, smooth him in, reel him into what they really brought him to Mason's house to do, which is give another autopsy to George. Now, he's obviously not going to give an autopsy to someone, a dead body in someone's basement, but that whole scene, to me, again, this show's personality is starting to get into me a little bit more in regards to me being interested in this show. Because, again, if you see my first 3 episode reviews, The tone was all over the place. I wasn't getting the good character moments. I was more interested in the supporting cast members than I was Mason. We didn't get any of Drake, who's my favorite character so far, but we get more of Della, we get more of EB, and then we get some backstory with Mason. So again, the first 10, 15 minutes, I'm like, okay, this show is starting to grow on me a little bit, but I wanted to definitely point that out. But as we kind of move forward, we see Virgil is not about doing an autopsy, but the fellas figure out a way to get him back on board, which we'll talk about here in a bit. But here is when the storyline kind of something to really pay attention to. We see that the doctors are telling Birdy, Sister Alice's mom, that she needs to recover. She needs to sit back, take some weeks off of doing her church thing. She needs to sit back. But obviously, Birdy does not want to hear that. But I think that's something to keep an eye out for. That Sister Alice is going to push herself. She's going to want to do what she wants to do with Charlie in his resurrection. But that's something to keep an eye out for. That she's going to push herself too much and have a seizure and maybe not come out of it. So that's something to keep an eye out for sure. And we see, Sister Alice is maybe rushing herself back to recovery sooner than she should. We see the elders want Sister Alice, to kind of be out of the picture. They want her to kind of renounce her stance with the church, also take back those comments she made about Charlie. We see them kind of set the stage there. This kind of hints back at the storyline where we get, last week, Baggerly talking to Matthew about creating a new church and this new building and everything. I think that's his planting to seeds to kind of separate himself from Sister Alice. So definitely keep an eye out for that story for further episodes. We see Mason and Pete plants the body of George at the golf course so they can get that second autopsy for Virgil to handle, which again, that was that comedic, even though it's a darker moment, it's a dead body, those moments with Virgil kind of really worked for me as far as the levity of this episode. We see Barnes threatens EB after digging up some dirt about EB and kind of his financial situation, and he says, you got a couple options, but if you don't kind of go through with the things, kind of play ball with us, I'm going to have you, disbarred. So that was something that kind of plays into the decision that we see EB do towards the end of this episode. As we get another scene, we really see, which I really love, we see that Barnes and Detective Ennis and Holcomb are talking about the pressure that EB's putting on them in the bum Mason, all the information he's finding out. So now we're seeing that we all kind of knew they were all in cahoots, but now that I'm really interested to find out why Barnes is helping out the detectives in regards to covering this up and finding someone to claim that, either Emily killed the baby Charlie or George did it. So it's just really interesting to see all these pieces starting to come together. We see corruption in the police force. We see that Barnes is part of this whole situation. So it's really, really interesting to see who killed Charlie and what was the reasons behind that. We may have got a hints of that when we see, Mason visiting Holcomb at his little elk club, but it's everyone starting to get into this corruption scheme, especially with Barnes. So, again, this was a really good moment for me because I've been talking about this for a couple weeks now. Where's Mason's family? What happened to his wife? Where's his kids? So we get a little bit of it. We don't get a full behind the scenes, but we see Teddy and his wife's name was Linda. They call Mason. He's saying, oh, did you get my gift? This, that, and the other. But it was kind of shortly lived because the guy, I think his name was Carmichael from the first episode. You guys remember Carmichael, the guy with the pie and the taking the TMZ photos that Perry did. He finds Perry and kind of beats him up and ends that family conversation pretty quickly. But I thought that was that was an interesting moment because we get a little bit more of Perry's backstory. We see that he still communicates with his son, and there's some rocky roads with him and his wife, and in regards to him maybe not following up or talking to his son maybe once or twice a month or whatever the case may be because he's so locked into this case and his work. So again, I'm interested to see if we get more of that backstory with Linda and Teddy and kind of where things fell apart. So, but like I said, a good character moment to find out more about Mason's background. We get more backstory with Mason when he goes to the house and he has his, he's sleeping with his love interest. I think her name is Lupe. And, we get a little bit of backstory about why he doesn't want to sell, which I'm not going to lie, I forgot about that whole storyline from the first episode. But why he doesn't want to sell his farm and his house is because he grew up there. His kids grew up there. He was married there. So it means a lot to him. But I thought, again, that was another, not a lot, but enough to build character and give you some backstory, give you a little bit of understanding of their relationship because we really haven't gotten that much understanding of Lupe Lupe and Mason's relationship, again, his connection to the farmhouse. So again, it's not a lot of stuff, but it's enough stuff to make you interested in the character for me to build the backstory, to get you interested in his backstory. So I'm loving all the little moments, little details that we're getting from this episode. So we get some more backstory with Della's character, kind of her life outside of being secretary for EB and a babysitter for Emily. We see that she has her own situation. She has a love interest, and that was, again, not a whole 20-minute scene and a whole backstory, but enough to give you who these characters are when they're not involved in a case. What do they do when they go home? I love those little moments that we got throughout this episode. Again, going back to Sister Alice, we see that she's somewhat going along with the whole speech that the elders and her mom kind of wrote for her, but then that is shortly lived because a stranger runs through the crowd and gives her a little blanket and says, hey, Charlie's going to be cold when you bring him back to life, which kind of ignites the fire from her, and she kind of takes all her remarks that she said before about, stepping away and putting brakes on her sermons and everything. But now she's back at it again. She will be rising Charlie from Resurrection on Easter Sunday, and we get the guy screaming at the end. But it'll be really interesting to see how the church will try to push Sister Alice out of her position and putting the pressure on her mother and doing something to get her off her high horse in this whole resurrection and shaking up the church. So very, very important things to look forward to with Sister Alice's subplot. We see a moment between EB and Emily, and EB kind of wanted her to kind of make a plea deal, and then he kind of changes his mind and he promises her that he's going to fight for her as long as she fights for herself, which we'll talk about EB at the end here. But the moment worked to a certain extent. It's something about every episode with Emily's character. She's getting less and less interesting for me. It's a little bit of the performance. It's also the lack of stuff that we're getting from her. But all the stuff that whenever we get involved with Emily's storyline, it just I kind of check out emotionally speaking, because I'm just not connected to the character. And I don't think the performance is the strongest for the Emily character. But let me know where you all are at with Emily and everything with her case. And if you feel connected to that character, because I personally don't. Every single episode since the first episode, she's gotten weaker and weaker from a character perspective. And also the acting hasn't been that strong. So that's just me personally, but let me know what you all are thinking. We see Mason and Pete find out that Detective Ennis is part of this ilk club and that has like this charity event and everything of that nature. His daughter's involved in it, and we kind of see that it's a coincidence that his ilk club is a building away from when the kidnapping that happened to Charlie. So again, we're seeing Mason and Pete putting the pieces to the puzzle together, that these detectives, Holcomb and Ennis, have something to do. We know that as an audience, but like I said last week, we're now getting to the point where we're the audience, we know what's going on. We know the corruption of the police force, at least those two detectives, and now Barnes. But now the show's main characters are starting to learn what we learned, so we can now all be on the same page. So I'm loving that the pieces are starting to come together. As we wrap up the episode, easily the most shocking moment of the episode, and thus far this series, we see EB after finding out he has financial issues. He has done something in the past that might have been unethical. He's kind of losing this case to a certain extent with Emily and everything of that nature. He seems to be alone. He seems to have some health issues. He goes in the kitchen, sits down in the kitchen, covers the bottom of his, the doorway, and turns up the gas in his house, alluding to him wanting to kill himself. Now, I personally think that Della's going to maybe come by and visit him, even though they had a bit of a dispute. They had a big argument this episode, but I think she's going to check up on him and maybe save him. Or this can be the last time we see EB. Let me know what you all are thinking, if he's going to be dead next week, if Della's going to save him, if he's going to come to his senses and just save himself. But if not, that would be a pretty big character loss if EB does take himself out. So, again, this is my favorite episode, guys. Again, character moments, those quieter, detailed moments for Mason and his family. Stella when she goes home and her love interest. EB and everything that we find out about him and see what he, if he does take himself out. Ennis and Holcomb, their kind of Teflon feeling of that their case is going to go the way they want it to is now kind of changing the shift there, and then we get the second autopsy. So, again, favorite episode so far, and it's a slow burn, but I'm starting to really, really enjoy it. This episode really kind of put me in the mark, like, okay, this show has potential to really, really be entertaining and have a good conclusion. So kudos to you guys. Let's keep this momentum into the rest. This is kind of the halfway point of the season. We got 4 episodes left, so episode 4 is my favorite so far, but let me know what you all thought of this episode. As always, like, share, comment, subscribe. Make sure you check out all my content that I did over the weekend, from Netflix to Old Guard review, Palm Springs on Hulu, Greyhound on Apple TV Plus. I did a almost 4-hour live stream for Spider-Man Far From Home watch along. Great stuff for you all to watch. A lot of great things coming this week. Hope you all have a great week, and we'll be seeing you on the next video.